Gimel on the base. And we're on? So then I may as well say that today's sponsor is Tommy and Sharon Fixler. We're sponsoring our Daf Yomi Shiur for Ephraim Ben Shifra. Thank you very much. And now we just have to figure out where we are. We were having a argument back and forth to try to figure out do we get down to the Tunnel Rabban on the bottom? No, not quite. Rabbi Yoshia had we had a difference of viewpoints in how to interpret the pasuk that had the word Elohim 3 times, right? Word Elohim means 3 judges. One perspective was this Elohim 3 times, that means there's 3 judges. The other one says that the first time is just to teach me about tchilos, right? So therefore it doesn't count, so I only have the other 2. So then I need to be able to have I can't have a beis din that's even. Therefore, since I can't have a beis din that's even, that's how I know that I need to have 3. Okay, so then we were starting to question, does Rabbi Yoshia really hold of this perspective that, and then Rabbi Yoshia says, no, I need to have all 3 of the I need to be able to have all 3 of them for a drush. All 3 of them are necessary. And the question is, why does he hold all 3 of them are necessary? Doesn't he agree with the idea that you can't have an even number of judges? So, in order to be able to without figuring out exactly where we left off, I should get one of those little tabs. But so the question the Gemara wants to know is, what does he do with that phrase that says "Achrei Rabim Lahatos," that you're supposed to go after the majority, and that you're not supposed to be lintos, you're not supposed to be able to have an even. You're supposed to have a majority of that you can follow. You should not be following. You should not wind up with a even number of beis din. You need to be able to have a majority. So what does he do with that? So Rabbi Yoshia, that's where we're going to start with. It is, if you see let's say the thin lines are from the wide lines on the bottom. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from on the skinny lines all the way up. Rabbi Yoshia b'shar beidina nami leislei. So the question that we're asking is Rabbi Yoshia of this position? We had suggested that Rabbi Yehuda had said in our Mishnah that you can't have 2. That you can have an even number of judges because he has 70 judges on the Sanhedrin, not 71. And we said, well, that's what Rabbi Yehuda only holds that way when it comes to the Sanhedrin because the pasuk specifically says so. When it comes to other courts, you cannot have an even number. Okay?
Amen.
So the question is, though, but Rabbi Yoshia disagrees. Rabbi Yoshia appears to need to not require a even number of and he does not seem to have a problem with an even number of judges. So the question is, Ve'alahai lintos my ovidle. What does he do with that pasuk? That pasuk does say that you're not supposed to go. That you're supposed to follow a majority. So then how does he use that pasuk if it's not to tell me that I can't have an even number of judges? So the answer is, mokim la bedini nefashos. He says that pasuk is talking about only in the circumstance of a capital offense, right? Not monetary cases. Monetary cases can have a even number of judges, but capital offenses have to have an odd number of judges. Ava bedini mamnas lo. But what about the fact that it says in the Mishnah, Shnayim omrim zaka ve'echad omer chayev, that if 2 judges say that a person is liable, is successful, and ve'echad omer chayev, and one says he's liable, zakai, then you're going to follow 2 to 1. You're going to follow the one guy who said the 2 guys who say that he wins the case. Shnayim omrim chayev, if 2 guys say that he is liable, ve'echad omer zakai and chayev, then you're going to follow the 2 guys who say he's liable, right? That's the way that it works in a majority, 2 to 1. So now, Nema Delok Rabbi Yoshia, are we suggesting that Mishnah that specifies clearly how a majority works, that you're going to go 2 to 1, then does that mean that Rabbi Yoshia doesn't agree with that because Rabbi Yoshia doesn't hold of this majority when it comes to financial matters? The answer is no. Afilu Tema Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia does ultimately agree that you need a majority to follow when it comes to monetary cases. So, Maisi lo b'kal v'chomer, because he brings what we call a kal v'chomer. The way that a kal v'chomer works is that if I have a circumstance where the law is a certain way, then clearly in other situations, when it's a much less severe case, that for sure is the law, right? We're going to say, well, you know what? It's like, imagine if I told my child to be home at 10 o'clock, right? And then my child says to me, is it okay if I get home at 9 o'clock? Well, if I said it's okay for you to get home at 10 o'clock, then for sure it's okay for you to get home at 9 o'clock. It's earlier, right? That's how a kal v'chomer works, right? So he says it works by a kal v'chomer when it comes to bedinim nefashos. When it comes to cases of capital cases, madini nefashos de chamiri, capital cases are clearly the more stringent type of court cases. We have to worry about making mistakes in those cases that can lead to life and death. So therefore, we are going to consider those to be the stringent. So nevertheless, Amar Rachman Azil Basaruba, the Torah says, you don't need to have a unanimous court decision in order to find a person guilty or innocent. You are going to go after the majority. Dini Mamanis Lo Kol Shekain. So for sure, when it comes to financial matters, that is clearly the case. Those who are coming in at a perfect time. We're at 2 dots. We're going to start talking about the next thing. Second wide line on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, Tana Rabbanan. Dini Mamanis Bishlosha. The rule is that, in a Mishnah says, that when it comes to court cases dealing with monetary laws, we said 3 judges. Rabbi Omer Bechamisha, when Rabbi says, though, you need 5 judges. Kedei sheyigmor hadin b'shlosha. Why does he say that? Because when you conclude the court case and you follow the majority, the side that you're going to follow will have 3 judges that say in the way that we're going to follow. So therefore, right, we're going to say, Otu bitlosa milo gamardina, betray. So he says, but the Gemara says, well, I don't understand. What if you follow the majority? If you had 3 judges, you'd still have a majority if you went 2-1. Why do you need to have 5 judges in order to get a majority? Have 3. You can have a majority at 3 judges and have a case 2-1. So the answer says, Hachi Kamar. This is what we meant to ask. Mipnei shagamar din bishlosha. He says that it's because you want ultimately to have 3 judges who are making the deciding, who are judging in favor or opposed, right? We don't want to have less than 3 judges in the final ruling. Whatever way we're going to go, the 3 judges is going to be the one that supports that side. Alma kasavar tlasa kiksivi bignardini ksivi. So how would that make sense? Where would be the source for that? Remember that the pasuk tells us about the 3 judges, tells us, right, again, Elohim, 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 we need 3 judges. What is that pasuk telling us we need 3 judges for? We've been presuming all this time that it means that you need 3 judges to start a case or to hold a case. You need 3 judges on the court. No, says Rabbi Yehuda, it means that you need 3 judges on the deciding side of a court case. If you need 3 judges on the deciding side of a court case and you're going to follow the majority, clearly you need 5 judges, right? So if you like, a baseball analogy, right? If you have a best of 5 series, whoever wins 3 games first wins, right? So this is the same thing. If I need to have 3 on the winning side, so then it's 5 judges that I need to have. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Then can we say the same thing about the 7?
Oh, hang on. That's a great question because the Gemara asks it in 1 second.
Right, you need 70 on one side.
That's a great question, right? That's exactly what the Gemara, Megadif ba Rabbi Yavo. Rabbi Yavo said, what kind of answer is that? For exactly this answer, this reason. Elamayata. If what you're saying is true, that whenever the Torah tells us that there's a certain number of judges, that means that's the number of judges that has to be on the winning side. So tehei Sanhedrin Gdol tzricha 140 v'echad. Then the Sanhedrin needs to have 141 judges, right? Because you need to have 71 on the side that wins in order to have the majority, 71-70. Kadesh Yagmar Din b'shivim v'echad. Utei Sanhedrin Ktana, and the smaller Sanhedrins that we were talking about, tzricha 40 b'chamish, are going to need 45. Why? Kadesh Yigmar Din b'shlosh v'esrim, so that you have 23 on the winning side, right? And that's not right. That's not what the Mishnah says. So that's not the source for Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's this halacha that Rebbe says that you need 5 judges must come from a different source. It has nothing to do with the fact that it says Elohim 3 times. Ella, rather, he says that's not true. How do you know it's not true? Because the pasuk says, Asfali shivim ish amar Rachmana. Moshe Rabbeinu was told, Hashem says, gather 70 elders, right? So he says, gather 70 men. So Mishas Asifa shivim. He didn't say gather 141 and then it'll have 70 in the conclusion. He says gather 70. There were only 70 men. that was it. So therefore, the size of the Beis Din is what's being counted when the Torah tells you how many people are involved, not the number of people that are on the winning side of the court case. So v'shaftu eida v'tzilo eida nami mishas shvitasa eida. So also when we said, how did we get to the number 23? We had to judge 10 people on one. We had to have 10 people on one side, 10 people on the other side. And when were they deciding 10 people on one side and the other side? During the judgment of the case, not after when they pronounced the verdict. So therefore, while they're having the argument, this side that you need 10 people on this side, 10 people on this side, and they're arguing it back and forth. So hachinami v'nikrav balabais Elohim mishas kriva. So also, if you read the pasuk about the judges, how many judges do we need? We need 3 judges. Well, that pasuk says about Elohim says, and they will bring the judgment close to the judges. So at what point do you need the 3 judges? When you bring the case to the judges, not at the conclusion of the court case, right? So mishas kriva shlosha. Ella, so rather, Rabbi Yevo says, for the exact reason we said, this is not the rationale why Rabbi requires 5 judges. He says, Ella hainu time de Rabbi. You know what Rabbi's explanation is? And again, all of the rationales behind how many judges is going to be is all going to be how you understand the pasuk. If you read the pasuk, what's your interpretation of the pasuk? So the answer is, Rebbe reads the pasuk as follows. This is again the pasuk that we read yesterday morning, right? The pasuk we read yesterday morning from the Chumash. Asher Yarshiun Elohim. This is in pasuk Ches, right? The one that the judges find to be guilty. That's Trey. That's 2. Elohim is a plural word. So there's 2 judges in that part of the pasuk. And then it says Nemar Elohim Lamata, V'Nemar Elohim Lamala. Well, in the second part of the pasuk, it says Yarshi'un, which is plural, right? Yarshi'un, the world. They find him to be, because the word Elohim could be singular or plural. It's difficult to be able to know from that word. But the word Yarshi'un is definitely plural. So therefore, if the word Yarshi'un is plural, the word Elohim that's next to it goes with it is plural. And if that Elohim is plural, then go back to the time it says Elohim earlier in the pasuk. That also must be 2 judges. Malamata shnaim af lamala shnaim. So therefore, both times it says the word Elohim, they each refer to 2 judges. They ain't based in shakal. You can't have an even number of courts. Remember, the first one we don't worry about because it's written 3 times. The first one we're not worrying about because we said that you're not going to have a drasha for because we said that was to teach us about the law in the first place. So that one's fine. But we do have 2 other times it says Elohim. Each of the other 2 times it says Elohim is plural. Therefore, we're going to wind up with 4 judges, and you can't have an even based in. So Mosif and Alei Mod Echad, we're going to add 1 more, Harekan Chamisha. That's going to bring us to the 5 judges that Rebbe holds. And that's what Rebbe's source is. And the Rabbanan say, Yarshi'un Ksiv. If you look in the Chumash, there's no Vav in that word Yarshi'un. Yarshi'un, when you read it, you say Yesh Em Lemikra is what we call this. When you read it, it's read and pronounced plural. But when it's written, the vav is missing. Yarshi'on, it's read, it's Yesh Em Mesores, it's the way that the word is written. So it's written and it looks singular. So therefore the Rabbanan say, look at it, it's written singular, so therefore it only means 1 judge. And the one previous says 1 judge, 1 plus 1 plus you can't have even, so that makes 3. And Rabbi Yehuda says Rabbi says that it must be 2 judges, and the extra one is 5. So what are they really arguing about? They're arguing about a concept called Yesh Em Lemikra or Yesh Em Lemesoras. Yesh Em Lemikra means that there are some times that I have words in the Torah, it's not written with any vowels, that I can read it one way, and the words, the letters as they're written, could be pronounced a completely different way. Do I look at the way that the letters are written as the main teaching, or do I learn from how it is supposed to be pronounced, what we have a tradition of how it's supposed to be pronounced? Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, we're going to get into a discussion over the next page of this entire concept, this concept of Yesh Em Lemikra, Yesh Em Lemesores, whether we understand the meaning of a pasuk by the way it's written or by the way it's read. And we're going to see that this is an argument in a number of circumstances in Gemaras, and the Gemaras here is going to collect numerous arguments on the same topic in order to be able to put them all together and see that this is a topic that is hotly contested over generations. Amar of Yitzchak bar, it changed Girsa to, it is Yosef. Amar of Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar of Yochanan. Rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, Ubei Shammai, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Akiva. All of these opinions, Rabbi Yehuda, ben Roitz, ben Beishamai, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Akiva, all of them Sfira Lahu Yesh Aim Lemikra. They are all going to take a look at how the pasuk is read. Right? Like we just had by Rabbi, Yarshi Un, it's plural. It's read, Yarshi Un, therefore it's plural. Rabbi Had Omran. Rabbi we just said. Right? That's Yarshi Un, even though it's written singular, it's pronounced plural, therefore we go by the pronunciation. That's one argument. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda ben Roitz. What about Rabbi Yehuda ben Roitz? Titania, we have a brisa. Sha'alu chachamim es Rabbi Yehuda ben Roitz. So they asked Rabbi, the students asked Rabbi Yehuda ben Roitz, Ekra ani shiv'im. When it comes to a baby being born, so in the times of the Gemara, the times of the Mishnah, they used to practice according to exactly the way it's written in the Torah. When a child is born, the blood that comes out from when a baby is born is not nida blood. Can't be nida blood because nida blood, by definition, is a menstruation cycle that comes from a non-pregnancy. So the blood that comes out is not nida blood. But the Torah says that when a male is born, so then there's a state, the woman is in a state of impurity for 7 days, and then she is in a state of purity, even if she's still bleeding, she's in a state of purity for 33 days. That blood is not considered to be impure. She's perfectly pure for 33 days. When it comes to if she has a girl, it's double that. 14 days of impurity, 66 days of purity after that. Okay? So, nowadays, for practical halacha, every blood we treat the same because people are just not experts. They don't know. So therefore, they treat everything the same. Every type of blood becomes nida blood, and every type of blood we consider a woman to be tamei immediately, and she has to separate from her husband for all that time until she stops bleeding and then goes to the mikvah. But in those days, it wasn't so. So the question is, how long is the impurity for? So the pasuk says, right? The pasuk can be read. If you take a look in your Gemaras, where that has little aleph on the side of the Gemaras near the margin, you can see the actual whole pasuk is quoted often. So here you see where that little aleph is. So I'm going to read from that section. This is the Torah or Hashalem, and the entire pasuk is quoted, and it says, "Ve'im nikeva teled." If the woman gives birth to a girl, "V'tam'osh shevu'ayim kenidasa," she will be impure like a nida for 2 weeks. And you see that how that is that's read. Shvu'ayim. Shvu'ayim is 2 weeks, right? It only has one yud. So it could be read shiv'im, which is 70, right? So is she impure? This is what the students were asking. Is the woman impure for 70 days? Or is she impure for 2 weeks, right? So then pasuk continues, she's pure for the next 66 days. So they asked him, right? Is it Ekra ani shiv'im? Yachol tehiyu let us nekeva tameh shiv'im. So is it possible that the woman is considered to be impure for 70 days? Amar lehen, he said to his students, Tima v'tiher b'zachar v'tima v'tiher b'nekeva. Look, there's a parallel that you have to be able to take a look between the male child and the female child. Ma keshetiher b'zachar b'nekeva kiflayim. If you take a look, that the amount of days that the woman is pure for a male child is 33 days. And the amount that the woman is pure for a female child is 66 days. It's double. So af kishetime, so too, the impure days works the same way. Bezachar b'nekeva kiflayim. Af kishetime bezachar b'nekeva kiflayim. So just like the 7 days by a male child, so by a female child, it's going to be double. La'achar sheyatzu. So after the students left, right, he explained that, and the students left, Yatza umachzir acharehem. He went out, and he followed them out for a second. Amar len, he called after them, Iatem zekukim lakach. You don't even need my explanation that I just gave you. Shvu'ayim karinon. It's pronounced in the Torah, shvu'ayim, right? Even though they were looking at the text, they went, look, it says shivim. Is it really 70? And he said, I know it's not 70, and here's why. He said, but you don't even need that. If you read the pasuk that's pronounced shvu'ayim, v'yesh em mikra, and we hold that you're going to follow the law based on how it's pronounced. Okay, that's the second. Next story, Beis Shammai. story of Beis Shammai, what does he hold? Ditznan, and here we get to our Beis HaMikdash. We learned in a Mishnah. When we had korbanos, so the sacrifices came in different sorts. Olas, shlomims, chatos, these are all the different types of common sacrifices. The general rule for an olah, for a shlomim, is that when there's 4 parts to the sacrificial process, right? We have to start talking about sacrifice and get used to it because it's coming up in only about a year or so, and you better get used to it because it's really not that scary, okay? When a sacrifice is brought, the first stage of a sacrifice is shechita, you're going to slaughter it. Okay, then the blood is caught, that's called Kabbalah. Then the blood is brought to the Mizbeach, okay, that's called Halacha. And then it's thrown and sprinkled on the Mizbeach, that's called Zrika. Those are the 4 parts of every sacrifice. Now, how each of them is done can be a little bit different. When it comes to the Olah and the Shlomim, the Mizbeach, as you see, that is inside here, in the Mizbeach, right here, this is the Beis HaMikdash area. This is the Ezras Nashim area, which is outside, not only because women were the only ones out there, but because women also could be out there. The Yisraelim could not come past these stairs, which are over here. So this area is where the Kohanim were mainly hanging out. And the Kohen would slaughter the animals on the north side of the Mizbeach, right? And they would catch the blood. They would bring it towards the Mizbeach. Now, for an Olah or for a Shlomim, you had to do 2 sprinklings, which are 4. How do you do 2 that are 4? You sprinkle the blood on this corner and on this corner, on the opposite corners. This corner and this corner, right? Northeast, southwest corners. And by sprinkling it on the 2 corners, you get it on the 2 sides. Okay? When it comes to the chatas offering, you're going to put it, there's actually a protuberance, right? Is that a good word? Protuberance on the corners, on the 4 corners. It doesn't really stick up here. But I drew a picture of it over here, right? This is my 3-dimensional graphic of the Mizbeach, right? And the Mizbeach looks like this, and they have these 4 corners here. And the 4 corners, the sprinkling of the blood for a chatas was done on all 4 corners. Okay? Now, another difference is that for a korban olah shlamim, the sprinkling was done at the bottom of the Mizbeach here and on the other side, on this corner. When it comes to the chatas, it's done on the top. Okay? So that's going to be a difference. There's a red line which goes here. You can even see it if you look closely on the side. They made a little line across.
The Shlomim goes below and the Chatos goes on top?
Yes. You're thinking, not so, Rabbi Loiterman. The answer is, it does get reversed. You're trusting me? Okay, good. So I'll leave it there. Okay, good.
Which part did you say was halacha? It was a transference, like tahaluchos.
Halacha means to carry it.
Right,
yes.
to carry.
That is correct. That's the transporting part.
Okay.
So that is what we need to know. That's the background information. Okay? Now, Beis Shammai says, Kol ha-nisin al mizbeach hachitzon. Right? All of the sacrifices where the blood was put on the outer altar. Now, it's good to mention. This is the outer altar. It's called so because it's outside of the Beis HaMikdash. If we were to look inside this area here, we don't have to worry much. That's over here. But in this area back here, that's where we're going to find the main utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. Back on about this portion in the back, that's the Kodesh HaKodashim on the inside of it. That's the Holy of Holies. The Ark of the Covenant from Indiana Jones is back here. Right, in this section here, and in the section on the front here, you've got the Mizbeach Hapnimi, the inner golden Mizbeach, which is on the inside, which will be underneath here, and then you have the menorah, and you have the Shulchan, which are on either side of the inner section of the Beis HaMikdash.
Is this the same as that, or is it just one?
So it was actually a duplicate room of the exact same above it, right? But we'll get to discuss the structure of the Beis HaMikdash. It's actually quite fascinating. But yes, these are cells of rooms that were built around the outside of it. So the actual part of the Beis HaMikdash section itself was under this section. Okay, so in any event, the blood of most sacrifices is brought on the outer altar. Okay, the blood of some sacrifices was sprinkled on the inner altar, namely, for example, the Parhelam Dover. We talked about this offering that was brought in the circumstance where the Beis Din makes a mistake, a Kohen Gadol's offering during the Yom Kippur service. There's blood that's sprinkled on the inside, but generally speaking, blood goes on the outer altar. So, Beis Shammai starts talking about those sacrifices. If I've got blood of a sacrifice that is to be sprinkled on the outer altar, shenosnon b'matona achas. Let's say I'm supposed to, as we said, you're supposed to sprinkle it on twice on each of the corners, so that it goes on each corner. Let's say he sprinkles it on one side and then he drops it and it spills all over the place. He does not finish the sprinkling. Is that a valid offering? Is that not a valid offering? So he says, if you did it once, keeper, then that is sufficient, right? Now, sometimes we have things that are required, things that are a mitzvah, meaning it's best if you do it twice, but if you only accomplish once, that's going to be sufficient. Now, how do we know? Well, there's a rule by korbanos. The rule by korbanos is anything that's mentioned in the pasukim one time, that's a mitzvah. If it's repeated in the pasuk a second time, that means it's required. Okay, so when we get into the details of these korbanos, we will see by learning all the pasukim that many of the rules of korbanos are not required. This one is for example, because it's only written in the pasuk one time, it's not repeated a second time. Therefore, it was done. But if you had a circumstance where for some reason it couldn't be done, it wasn't what we call ma'akiv, it wasn't required. Didn't ruin the offering if you didn't do it. Now he says, ubechatos, let's say I have a sin offering. As we said, now the sin offering is going to have the sprinklings on the top section and it's going to be done on all four. So shtei matanos. So all you are required to do is 2 of the sprinklings. If you didn't accomplish all 4 and you only did 2, that would be sufficient. Beis Hillel omrim, Beis Hillel say, Af bechatos shenosnam b'matana achas kiper. Even 1 would be sufficient. Now, what is the source for the disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Why is 1 acceptable for a chatos according to Beis Hillel, and Beis Shammai requires 2? V'yomar Rav Huna. Rav Huna explains, my time of the Beis Shammai. What is Beis Shammai's logic? Well, in 3 different sections, talking about 3 different types of korban chatos offerings, it uses the word kronos. Kronos means the corners. Okay, kronos in 3 different places.
Where the word comes from.
Right?
Corner.
Which?
I mean,
right.
You just
corner, right? Corner for the kronos. That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Right. Corner, right? Kronos. So, arekan shesh. Now, kronos is a plural form. Corners. Right. So each time it's written, it means 2. So 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6. Hence, it's written 6 times to sprinkle it on the corners. So, arba mitzvah, following our rule, the first time it's written, it's only going to be a suggestion or the mitzvah to do it, right? Ushtayim lakiv, the second time is lakiv. So if I've got 6, that means it's a mitzvah to do it 4 times, but required to do it twice, right? That makes sense. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because the first time it says, I go 1, 2, 3, 4 times. There's only 4 corners, so I can't have a 5th corner. So I'm going to go back and do 1, 2.
Right? Okay. So you're ma'akev to do 2.
So you're ma'akev to do 2. And 4 are mitzvah,
times.
right?
So 4.
Got it? Good. Okay, that's my clever diagram. Okay, now, Beis Hillel omrim. Beis Hillel says, "Af bechatos shenosnon b'matana achas kiper." Beis Hillel says, I'm sorry, I went back a line. So he says, Beis Hillel omrim. Beis Hillel say, kronos. Same words, but he says if you look in the Torah, only the first one has a vav, the second 2 do not. Okay, so that means when it says kronos with a vav, that's plural. Kronos without the vav is singular. So that means it's 2 plus 1 plus 1, which gives me 4. Harekan arba, that gives me 4, which means it's 3 that are a mitzvah and 1 is required. I'm waiting for it. The next line of the Gemara is about to hit me the first next line of the Gemara. He's going to say, wait a second. 4 that make them 4 as a mitzvah, and none are required.
Right.
That's what he was going to say. See, I knew I was waiting. I was reading this Gemara and I go, Brian's going to ask this question before I even get to the next line. I was watching it happen. I knew that was happening. Kulu, ve'ema kulu hula mitzvah. Let's say all of these are for the mitzvah, right? You only have 4, right? The way that Beis Hillel is learning it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. That's all the corners. Every corner needs to get 1. That's a mitzvah. There's no duplicates.
Right, but
therefore,
it's not ma'akev because it's not.
There's nothing ma'akev.
Right.
So the answer is, you're right, except kapara b'chti lo ashkechon. There's no such thing as an offering that no blood is brought. That wouldn't make any sense. Right? You slaughtered it, you caught the blood, you walked to the mizbeach, and then what? You did nothing? So then what was the point? Right? It's not a sacrifice if you didn't have any blood. So therefore, without any blood, there's no sacrifice. So therefore, at least 1 is for sure required. Well, if 1 is for sure required, I got to take this one off the end, and then I got to put it here, So that means only 3 are for a mitzvah and 1 is required. Right? Because I can't have none.
Right.
Okay, so now. That's the argument between Rabbi Shimon and Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Again, Yesh Em L'Mikra, Yesh Em L'Masoros. Very nice. What about Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon's argument. Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Shtayim kil chason ushlishis afilu tefach. So he says that when we have a sukkah, when I have a sukkah, this is going to be my aerial view of a sukkah. Okay, get it? There's 4 walls of a sukkah. He says, really, you don't need 4 walls in a sukkah. All you really need in walls in a sukkah, he says, 2 of them have to be built according to that you need 2 full walls. Kihil chosan means at least 7 tfachim, right? That's the size that in Masechah Sukkah comes out that we need. And the 3rd wall can be even a little bit, 1 tefach. That's all you need. Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. That one I can't explain. That one's not written in the Torah anywhere. It's a halacha l'Moshe miSinai that the last wall can be just a little bit of a something. Okay, so that you'll have to take the word of Moshe on that one. Okay, but that's okay. He's reliable. It's in the Animamins, so there. Okay, so now Shtayim kilchos and shlishis afilu tefach. Rabbi Shimon. That is what the Tanna Kama says. The Rabbi Shimon says shalosh kilchos and revius afilu tefach. He says it's got to be 3 walls. And the 4th wall needs to be a little bit. That's how he holds a sukkah needs to be. Does one look familiar? Yes, we hold this way, right? We hold like the Tanna Kama, right? You don't need to have all 4 walls. You only need to have 3. So now, what is the reason behind the argument? But my Kamithki, what do they argue about? Rabban and Savri, Yesh Em L'Masoros. Rabbanan are going to be the ones who say. You can read what the words of the psukim say. Rabbi Shimon Savri, Yesh Em L'Mikra. And Rabbi Shimon says, we're going to follow the way that it's written because it is written with. So he explains. Rabbanan Savri Yeshem L'Masoros. Rabbanan say that it's going to follow Masoros. Basukos. When the Torah talks about sukkah, it says 3 times. Basukos. 2 of the times there's no vav.
So each of the time.
So each of the times without a vav, it's 1 wall.
Right.
So basukos is 1. Basukos is 1. Basukos is 2. Harekan 4. Arba. That's 4.
Right, but we just said before when we did Chronos.
Yeah.
That worked out to 1. You're ma'akev for 1 corner. So why wouldn't it be the same?
Because we're not dealing in korbanos anymore. Korbanos, it's a special rule by korbanos that I need to say something twice in order for it to be ma'akev, in order to be required.
Right.
For every other area of halacha, that's not the case. Once it's written in the Torah, it's required. There's a rule by korbanos.
Only by
special korbanos rule.
So the 10 Commandments is still good.
That's right, yes. 10 Commandments are good. It only says don't kill once, right? I'm like, it's a good idea.
It's read twice.
It's read twice, it is.
It's all not. There you go.
So, now, basukos, harikan arba, that makes 4. Dalchad kro legufei. So one of these psukim is for sure going to be talking simply about the requirement to have a sukkah in the first place. Right? So that's out. So therefore that lives pashulei tlos. That leaves me with 3 walls. Asa hilchsa comes the halacha l'Moshe miSinai, gar asa l'shlishis. It's going to take the 3rd wall and make it small. V'ukimta tefach, we said that it's going to hold by a tefach. Hence, we have 3 walls. One of them is a tefach. That's how the Chachamim read it. Rabbi Shimon Savar. Rabbi Shimon says, no. Basukos. Right? It's read and pronounced basukos. Even though there's no vav, it's pronounced with a vav. Hence, it's plural. Basukos. Harekan sheish. That makes 6. You need 6 walls in a sukkah. Well, yeah, but dalchad kro legufei. Take one of the psukim out because that's explaining that you need a sukkah in the first place. Each one of the psukim is 2 walls, right? So therefore, pashul hu arba, you're left with 4. Okay. Asa hilchasa garas l'revius. The halacha l'Moshe miSinai comes, takes the 4th wall and cuts it down to a little bit. V'ok me'at tefach. You've got a tefach there. That is the argument between Shimon and the Rabbanan about how many walls need in a sukkah. Great. Sourced in the same thing. Rabbi Akiva to Tanya. What about Rabbi Akiva? He learns in a brayso. Rabbi Akiva says, "Minayin l'revius dam sheyatsa mishnei meisim shemetame be'ohel." When I have a combination, when there is a room, and inside that room there is a measurement of tuma in that room, everything inside that room becomes tameh. What does tameh mean? Without getting too complicated and technical, is a transference of an impure force which can move from a major source of impurity like a dead body over to people or food items, such that it makes a practical difference in certain laws, like where you can eat that food. Can you bring it into the area where the Beis Hamikdash is? Can it be, if it's eaten by somebody who has to be kodesh, can that person perform service in the Beis Hamikdash? Generally speaking, we don't worry about it much because it practically makes a big difference for service in the Beis Hamikdash. Nowadays, that there's no service in the Beis Hamikdash, there are not so many places where tuma is very practical at all. So therefore, we don't worry about it so much. But back then, it was a big deal. So now, what happens if I don't have the volume of blood necessary in order to create impurity in this room? But what I do have is, I have 2 half volumes of blood from 2 separate corpses. Can I combine them to do, right? Let's say I'm in a phlebotomist's office, and I've got all of the blood samples there, right? So now I've got from multiple different sources. Do they combine together to create a tumah? Okay, so says Rabbi Akiva says, sure they do. Dam shiyotz mishnei mesim mitameosh. Remember, because the pasuk says, "I'll call nefashos meis lo yavo." You should not come onto the souls of the dead. So that means yavo shtei nefashos. That's 2 souls. So that v'shir echad into 1 size of impurity of the dead. So therefore, two combination sources can combine together to create 1 size. Rabbanan disagree. Nefashos ksiv, it says nefashos without a vav, indicating that it's only singular. So therefore, it has to be from 1 source, cannot be from multiple sources. Yeah.
But does it need to be from a dead person, the blood, or could it be like
Can be any blood.
You go to Canada Blood Services,
Yeah, it would seem to be. I don't know that it has to be from a dead person. I've never been told as a Kohen that I cannot go to donate blood to where they're donating pints of blood or anything like that. So I'm wondering about it. I'm going to look into what the halacha, what the practical halacha of it is.
Would that be a problem to get a blood transfusion?
Yeah, as a Kohen, I'm going to look. That wouldn't, because it's saving your life anyway, right? So, but I've never heard of it being a problem. So I'm going to. I'll do a little bit of research on that to see. Okay, so now Maskifla Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, "Mi ika deleis la yeshem l'mikra." Time out. All of these arguments have been based on the presumption that we're going to have a disagreement between whether it's the way you read it or the way it's pronounced. Well, but wait a second. Nobody holds that it is only the way that it's read and not the way that it's pronounced, right? The way it's pronounced and not the way it's read. Because, V'atanya, I'll show you a brayso. The brayso is like this. Nobody should be able to cook a kid in its mother's milk. That is the source for the prohibition of eating meat and milk. Okay? Now, Yochel b'chelev. That word cholav means milk. But the word chelev means fat. How do I know that there's a prohibition of eating meat and milk? Maybe the prohibition is frying some meat. Right? I can't fry some meat in fat. So Amar Yeshem Lamikra. Right? It must be that everyone understands that even though the word can be pronounced the other way, because it's written the other way, it is pronounced chalav, and therefore everybody agrees it's milk. So therefore everybody agrees that the pronunciation, the way that we have a tradition of how it's pronounced, matters. Nobody says that there isn't, and that's the point, is that nobody, no rabbi any place that says that you're allowed to eat meat and milk, and you're not allowed to eat fat and milk and meat. So therefore, nobody holds that way. Therefore, how are we going to explain all of these arguments, which were based on the presumption that somebody held that we were going to ignore the way that the pasuk was pronounced? So we have to go through each one of these again. So rather, Rabbi v'Rabbanan b'hakam v'fagi. Rabbi and Rabbanan. Let's start off with them. What were they arguing about? Rabbi Savar Yarshi'un Elohim. When a pasuk says Yarshi'un, we said that was plural. So he says, you know why he holds that it is, that everyone agrees that Yarshi'un is plural, right? That's what we have to now decide that was the way it's pronounced. Everyone agrees that Yarshi'un is plural. Rather, right, Yarshi'un Elohim Achirini. They say that if you read this pasuk, it says that you're going to bring the case to the judges, and then who the judges find to be guilty, well, is it the same judges or are they different judges? Says Rabbi, that's different judges. First we were talking about 2 judges, then the end of the pasuk we talked about 2 more judges, so that makes 4. The Rabbanan Savar Yarshun Deheich Vehai. And he says, no, the Rabbanan say it's the same 2 judges. 2 judges here, 2 judges there. Therefore, there are only 2 judges in this pasuk. It's the same guys. So therefore, there's only 3 total. That's the argument between whether you need 3 judges or 5 judges. Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz. What are Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz? Lo pligi Rabbanan alei. So then in Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz's case, about whether it was the baby was going to be tummy for 70 days or 2 weeks, nobody argues with him. So that's easy, right? He says it's pronounced Shivayim. That's great. It is. And nobody argues with him. Beis Hillel, what about Beis Hillel? Tanya, we have in a brisa. Why does Beis Hillel say that you only need? You're right, because if Beis Shammai is correct, it's Kronos. Why does Beis Hillel disagree? So the answer is he has a different reason why he disagrees. He says v'chaper v'chaper v'chaper. It says 3 times that you should atone. Mipnei hadin. So he says, we're going to explain what that means. V'halo dinhu. There should be a logical conclusion. Nemar damim lamata v'nemar damim lamala. Ma damim hamurim. So it says in the Torah that you're going to sprinkle the blood below the line, right? We said this, I erased my line, but below the line, we talked about the shlamim sacrifices, the olah sacrifices were sprinkled below the line, and then we have some sacrifices that are sprinkled above the line. We know how many times you have to sprinkle below the line, 2, but 1 is all that's required. And above the line, we know that you're going to sprinkle it 4 times. We know that it says v'chaper 3 times, so I know that I'm going to sprinkle it 3 times, right? But now, how many are required? So the answer is we're going to decide that we're going to learn one from the other, right? Just like there's a logic. Just like the blood below the line, namar damim ma damim hamurim lamata. Just like the blood that we are mentioning below the line, shenasnan b'matana achas. Kiper, if you only sprinkle it 1 time, we said that was going to be okay. Af damim hamurim lamala. So too by the chatos, if I sprinkle it only 1 time, shenasnan b'matana achas, kiper, it's going to work. Oh, kalech haderech zu. But how do you know that that's the case that you're supposed to compare it to? We could compare the chatos sprinkling to a different chatas offering, rather than to compare it to an olah offering or a shlamim offering. Nemar damim b'chutz v'nemar damim b'fnim. When it comes to chatos, there are chatos offerings that are brought outside on the outside altar, and we said there are a couple that are brought on the inner altar. Now, the ones that are brought on the inner altar always are sprinkled on all 4 corners of the altar. So, ma damim hamurim bifnim chiser achas mimatanos lo asav lo klum. If you skip any of the placements of the blood, then the whole offering is no good. Everything's you got to get the blood in all of the 4 corners. Af damim hamurim b'chutz chiser achas mimatanos lo asav klum. Maybe that's where we're going to learn, and that's going to be the same thing as the chatos offering outside. You're also going to need to put blood on all 4 corners. So let's take a look. Near lemidoma, which of the 2 is it more similar? Right? Done in chutz michutz, vein done in chutz mipnim. Does it make more sense to compare a sacrifice of a chatos, which is outside, from other outside sacrifices, like the shlamim or the olah? Or look at it maybe the other way. Done in chatos v'dalad kronos michatos v'arba kronos. We're going to say, look, it makes more sense to compare a sacrifice called a chatos, in which you've got to sprinkle it 4 times, to another korban chatos, where you have to sprinkle it 4 times. Right? There are similarities in both ways and differences. So I can't prove it one way or the other. This one is an outside offering. It's being sprinkled 4 times. There are differences. There are similarities. Which way do I go? Talmud Lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says, so mipnei hadin kiper. So it says, the pasuk says, he learns it. It says v'chiper 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 3 times, and therefore, so that you will not, that even though you only brought 3, unlike the inner offering, 3 would be sufficient. That's all that you need. So and if you can only bring 3, and that'll be sufficient. So 2, then it makes sense that all you would need would be 2, because 4 is not required. So you're not going to compare it to the outer one. So 4 would be required. 2 would be required. And so 2, even 1 would be sufficient. right?
Wait,
So that's
how did we break that down?
Here's what we decided, right? We either had to decide that the chatas was comparable to the inner chatas and you needed all four.
Right.
Or you had to compare it to the Ola and Shlomim, which only needed one. Right. But you couldn't, so which one were we going to do? So once it says v'chiper, 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 and tells you that 3 are sufficient, well, if it was being compared to the chatas on the inside, 3 could not be sufficient.
Right.
4 would have to be sufficient. Therefore, it's clear from the pasuk that we're not comparing it to the one that's on the inside. We're comparing it to the one that's on the outside. Therefore, just as 4 is ideal, 3 would be acceptable. Now, if 3 is acceptable, obviously 2 is acceptable. So is 1, because it's being compared to the Ola and the Shlomim, which only one is necessary. That's how Beis Hillel is learning it. Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. Now let's talk about Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan. Beha pligi. This is their argument. Rabbi Shimon Savar schacha lo ba'ikra. Rabbi Shimon just says, look, word chronos, each one is worth, is going to be pronounced double, right? So he holds that you've got 4 walls. He says there's no necessity of writing a pasuk to tell me that you have to have schach on your sukkah. The Rabbanan Savri schach ba'ikra. Rabbanan says you got to reserve one of those psukim require to have schach. Okay, so therefore one of those 3 walls is not really 3 walls, it's really schach. So therefore, you're only going to need 2 in a little bit. For Rabbi Akiva Rabbanan, what about Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan? Baha pligi. This is what their argument. Rabbi Akiva Savar, Akiva holds nefashos tarti mashma, that the word nefashos means 2 souls. If I have 2 sources of tuma from 2 different corpses, I can combine them together. For Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan say that's not what the word nefashos, even though that is a plural word, nefashos dialma mashma. It just says meaning corpses, meaning not one particular corpse, but any corpse of the world, right? I like to ride horses. That does not mean that I like to ride 2 horses at the same time. It just means that there's no particular horse that I am keen on riding. I like horses, right? That is the same idea, right? Nefashos, any of the corpses, but not multiple corpses. And that's the source of their dispute. Now, what we're suggesting is...
But it means when it says nefashos, like not human. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense.
No, they have to be human, right? So there's no tumah by animals.
So then I don't understand the plural. Like if I say nefashos, so obviously it could mean 2, or nefashos, like obviously if I say 1, like wouldn't it automatically apply to everyone? Why say it plural? To say it applies to everyone if it's all
sometimes the pasuk will say, so as not to indicate a particular nefesh, it'll say nefashos, right?
Right, but we couldn't deduce a particular nefesh. And if we said nefesh, we would mean without.
It would be the same, right?
Right?
But I'm saying, but the phrase is not wrong, right? As I say, if I say I like horse,
right?
Okay, that also means I like horses, right? That's why, Now, one second. Well, the way we're coming out is we're going to learn and understand our psukim the way that we pronounce them. Okay, so that's good, right? But Vatanya, we have a brisa. Litotafos, litotafos, litotafos. Harekan arba, right? We've got by our tefillin. It says litotafos. They should be litotafos, litotafos, litotafos. Whatever that word means for a second. But it says they should be a totafos. Harekan arba. That makes 4. How are you counting 4? Litotafos is without a vav. That's 1. Litotafos without a vav is 1. And totafos with a vav is 2. So that makes 4. 1 second, you just said litotafos is always going to make 2 because that's how we just pronounced it. So that's different. Rabbi Shmuel says. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says, Eino tzarich tot b'kosvei. I don't need that. Tos b'kosvei shtayim, pas b'afrike shtayim. I don't need to explain the word totafos, and count them up. No. The word tot in Kosvi language, it means 2. And the word phos in African is 2. Therefore, the word totafos means 4 partials. That's what it means. Okay? So that's the translation. Pas b'afrike is shtayim. That's right. So in the Afriki language, that is 2.
Interesting.
Yep. So therefore, when the Torah uses the word totafos, that literally means 2. Right? And this is my 4. And so therefore, the totafos is 4 partials. Right? That's what I'm supposed to do. Totafos, I put the 4 partials between my head. Okay. El yolam pligi. So clearly, there is an argument on this point because what do you mean? There's totafos, totafos. Am I counting it as one or am I counting them as two? So everybody there are going to argue in that point. The answer is they argue that's true when the pasuk is different between the way it's read and the way that it's written. Of a high, but in this circumstance, we're back to the original explanations we had for all the arguments, right? But why is it cholav and chelev? The answer is cholav v'chelev dechi hadadi ninu. It's spelled the same way. That's not the same thing, right? In all of these other circumstances, shvuayim, one of the yuds was missing, right? Totafos, one of the vavs was missing. So there was a difference between the way it was spelled and the way it was pronounced.
Right.
Chelev and cholav, there's no difference between spelling it the way it's pronounced and your alternate pronunciation. That's just not an alternate pronunciation. The word is spelled the same way. So therefore, nobody holds that way. So therefore, if it's chelev cholav dechi hadadi ninu yesh im lemikra, we're always going to go based on our traditional pronunciation.
I understand why they use a different language to
It's a great question,
interpret.
right? Why? I don't know. Why Hashem called? The name Hashem gives to the tefillin is the totafos, which is literally which is using a different language.
Which two languages? It was Afriki.
He says bekasvi. Does he give a source where kasvi is? He says Godfi. I don't know where that is. Yep, could be from the Caspian area. It could be right. Makes sense. And also the Afriki, also the name of the place.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't interesting. Jacob Tota's voice. Favorite book.
I will have to try to hold that question. We'll make note of that question. Why the other languages? And I'm going to try to figure out if I can find an answer to that. I'll try to post the answers to questions on the chat if I can. So if I can find an answer, let's say some of these good questions. Okay, now what about the hare yireh yera'eh? Right. It says by the fact that we have an obligation to show up and be seen on the Yom Tovim at the Beis HaMikdash. So it says you can yireh, you could be afraid, or yera'eh, you could be seen. Dechi hadadi ninhu. The letters are exactly the same, right? Upliki, there shouldn't be an argument. We just said if the letters are the same, nobody's going to argue. Well, we have an argument. Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Yochanan ben Davai Omer. Yochanan ben Davai says, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Hasuma be'echad me'enav potter. Sorry, not to be afraid, but it means to be seen or to see. Somebody who is blind in one eye, he is exempt from showing up to the Beis HaMikdash. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Yera'eh, you should be seen. Yera'eh kederech shebal lir'os. You have to be seen the way that you would see, the way that a person sees. Since you can't appear with full vision, therefore you are exempt from coming. That's how he learns that pasuk. Okay?
Interesting.
So there's a kederech shebal le'ra'os, kach ba li'ra'os. Right? The way that a person comes to see, that's the way a person shall be seen. Hence, if you're blind in one eye, you are exempt from showing up on the shalosh regalim. So now, ma li'ra'os b'shtei einov, just like to see is normally with two eyes, af li'ra'os is b'shtei einov, you need with two eyes. Elam Ravacha brei de Ravika. So now, Ravacha says in Ravika, I need a better explanation for why there's no argument when it comes to chelev and chalav. The answer is Amar Krav, much simpler. The reason why is because the whole pasuk says lo siv ashel gedi, you shall cook a kid in its mother's milk. Derech bishol asra Torah. Cooking is in liquid, right? Frying is not in liquid, right? Frying is if you're going to use fat, right? That's not the same as cooking. Cooking is you submerge some item in liquid. So therefore, whatever is in this pasuk, chelev or chalav, it better be a liquid.
What's the word for frying?
What's the word for frying? I know that we talk about the machvas pans that are in the Beis HaMikdash that are pan fried. But what is the verb for frying? I don't know. I'm going to try to find that one also by Bishul Shabbos. Right. Yeah, Bishul on Shabbos. Bishul, right? Yes, this is cooking specifically, right? We have baking, we have cooking, we have roasting. Tzli is roasting versus frying, and no, that's not going to be the same.
Is it saying this because oil would be predominantly used for frying?
So it's not oil; it's fat, right? Fat is
fat would be.
It's a solid, which then gets rendered, which then you're cooking it.
That's what I meant. Right. I mean, yeah.
Right. So
it'd be used for frying.
Bechelev, he says Shuman Inkan Bishul Ella. He says the word is tigun. Tigun is to fry. Tikkun. All right. Taner Rabbanan. Dini Mominus B'Shlosha. Back to the issue at hand. Monetary laws are with 3. It's always good to go to just once you say that statement again, we're like, all right, back to work. Judges with 3, right? We're judging our court case with 3. Now, let's say you've got a guy who's a single fellow. He is expert, called Mumchel Rabim. Okay? So then, he is an expert to the public. Don Afilu Yechidi, he can even judge cases by himself. Amar Rav Nachman explains, Kigon Ana Don Dini Mominus B'Yechidi. Someone like me, I can do it. Right? We've seen Rav Nachman's name before. He's often quoted when it comes to monetary laws. He says, I'm the sort of a fellow. Now, remember, this is according to the opinion that holds that from the Torah, all we really needed was one judge anyway. We were only requiring 3 because we didn't want to have one person be a foolish person and he wind up being the court case by himself. This precludes that problem. If the one guy you've got is what we call Mumchel Rabim, he's officially a certified expert in the field, he can do it by himself. Ruchia also says, Kigon Ana, like me. Don Dini Mominus B'Yechidi, I can do it by myself. Ibo Elu, so he asked the final question. Kigon Ana, Dikmiri V'Savirna V'Nakitna Reshusa. Well, he says, what about these fellows? What was the qualifications that they had that made them able to do it? Was it the fact they had 3 qualifications? They learned themselves what the halachas were. They were smart enough to be able to derive and apply those rules. And number 3, they received permission. They had to ask permission from the local authority, the Reish Galusa or the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael, in order to be able to judge. Aval lo nakit reshusa. What if the fellow was smart enough, he knew the laws? What if he was able to apply, but he never asked permission? Would that be acceptable or not? Dine, so lo nakit reshusa. Dine lo dina. Is it that his judgments are not judgments? O dilma, or is it avagav de lo nakit reshusa dine dina? Or does it not matter? Right? Is that a requirement, the fact that he has to ask permission? Now, the permission makes a little bit of a difference because where is the source of, this is the question, what is the source for the power that a Beis Din has? Right? Is the source of the power of the Beis Din the fact that the Torah tells us that this one fellow, he has the power to judge this? Or is it coming from what we call Hefker, Beis Din Hefker? The Reish Galusa has this authority to be able to transfer monetary items from this person to this person. Therefore, you're basically judging by the permission of the Reish Galusa, this exarch, this head of the Babylonian community who had this authority. So we want to know, is the fact that he has to ask permission a requirement or not? Okay, so because the question is like this, he says, what we really want to know is if his court case, if things go sideways, right? The guy makes a mistake in a law, right? Is the court case finalized and valid? And if the court case is finalized and valid, we also need to know whether the judge is going to be held liable for what he judged, right? These are going to be our 2 issues, and we're going to wrap up here and pick up with this point tomorrow, right? We have 2 different, either you're an invalid judge, in which case nothing you did was meaningful in any event, right? Or you also have part number 2, what you judged is completely valid. But if you made a mistake, then the litigant who lost can sue you and get his money back because you messed him up. Or is it that your case is valid, and not only that, but you're protected from any liability as a result of whatever case that you've judged? And that's what we're going to be discussing tomorrow.
Okay.
Right.